Good morning. That was good. I want to thank you all for catching the red eye back on the Concorde last night from the royal wedding. I know I do want a full report. It was hard to be here and not be there. I thought that'd be funnier. It must have been a long night for everyone. Gosh. Everybody was up watching the royal wedding. So welcome back to the second day of our working session. We were up very late last night preparing a lot of the material that you gave us yesterday. I want to thank everyone for an incredibly productive day yesterday. I know it was a short amount of time to prepare a lot of information about a lot of big topics. I want to thank three of our scribes that helped us put a lot of this information together, Danny O'Shaughnessy, Christopher Coase, and Catherine Tang. They really were the rock stars last night. Let's give them a big round of applause. They didn't get to come to the receptions. So this morning we have a report out from the forums, and again, I just want to emphasize that this is not a representation of any one organization or any one mayor. It's really just a report out of what we heard yesterday. We tried to sum it up. You may not see every single thing that was said yesterday. We got so much content. We're trying to kind of give you the high level. There will be a report out that we do after this report, after this summit, and where we're going to try to bring more of the information together so your voice will be heard if you don't see it up here today. After about a 30-minute report out from the wonderful members we have over here, we will have about 30 minutes for people who weren't in one of the other forums or if you just have something else to say and to add to the conversation. We will have 30 minutes to sort of continue to beef up and talk about what we've been talking about, continue to do some work. So right after that, we didn't have a chance to present those findings to federal officials. We'll start that with a 20-minute speech from Secretary Sean Donovan, who is here. Thank you, Sean, wherever you are. And then we'll go into a panel with other representatives from HUD, DOT, the White House Domestic Policy Council, and the NEA. And following that, we'll have a lunch honoring Mayor Daley and a closing speech by our chairman. Sound good? So we are going to jump right in now to our report out. We're just going to start with Mayor Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz was first elected mayor of Miami in 2001, and in 2008 served as president of the United States Conference of Mayors. Diaz's leadership in Miami was innovative and transformative, and he has received numerous national awards and recognitions for his design leadership. In private life, he remains active in Miami and nationally, among others, sits on the boards of the Bloomberg Family Foundation and UPenn's Institute for Urban Research. Please help me welcome Mayor Manny Diaz.
Thank you, and good morning. Mayors face significant challenges every day: eradicating poverty, providing safety for our residents, providing a quality education for our children, and creating opportunity, economic opportunity for all of our residents. But our role is to make cities sustainable, to make them work, to be the architects of their future, is perhaps more important today than at any time in our history. The single most critical response to help keep our country strong is to embrace smart growth, to design cities that make sense. To that end, transportation design and investment is perhaps the most significant issue facing us today. But cities cannot do it alone. We need a partner in Washington. America's failure to plan and invest in transportation and transit is bad for the American family. Public transportation can yield significant savings to an American family. It's bad for American business, increasing the cost of moving goods and creating annual losses to the bottom line in the hundreds of billions of dollars. It's bad for our environment. Use of public transportation can cut our greenhouse gas emissions by over 30%. It's bad for our health, and it is bad for our continued dependence on foreign oil. Proper planning and investment will propel our economy forward, assure our continued global competitiveness, stimulate job creation, generate tax revenues, and lower the cost of doing business, increase corporate revenues and American exports, and ease the U.S. trade deficit. America's future prosperity, our world economic standing, and our ability to accommodate 120 million more people in the United States by the year 2050 directly depends on rebuilding our infrastructure. America's backbone is broken. Our spinal cord is severed, and we are on the verge of paralysis. That is why we need a national infrastructure Marshall Plan. We need to see our infrastructure as our nation's global nerve center. It is more than just roads, but a giant web of connectivity and mobility. It is about powering our future and sustaining the American way of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Diaz. Moving on to Mayor Michael A. Nutter. After nearly 15 years in public service, Michael Nutter was sworn in as the 98th mayor of his hometown of Philadelphia in 2008. Mayor Nutter also enjoyed an accomplished career in public service, business, and financial administration. Currently second vice president to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, he is scheduled to become president following Mayor Villaraigosa. He, too, is a graduate of the Mayor's Institute on City Design and hosted MICD 43 in February of 2009 in Philadelphia. Mayor Nutter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. I don't know who does the scheduling. I don't know why I was put after Manny Diaz. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. He is so, so great. Let me say two words. Design matters. Design matters. And cities matter also. And picking up on Mayor Diaz, when we talk about our federal partnerships, which are growing, they need to be strengthened. There's no question about it. Cities cannot make it, metro areas cannot make it without a strong partner in Washington, recognition of the things that we do, the things that we can accomplish, because mayors have to get things done each and every day. We are, in fact, the chief designers through our planning departments or through our economic development agencies. We see the things that happen on a daily basis. We can utilize resources quicker, faster, and implement projects much better than any other governmental unit anywhere else. Also, the fact of the matter that the federal government does not have a capital budget, that issue must be addressed. You cannot deal with all these infrastructure issues on a wait until it breaks and then we'll fix it basis. The federal government needs a capital budget. And lastly, this partnership not only must be strengthened, but must be clear to cities and metro areas all across the country. And as we have a national foreign policy, we need to better understand what our domestic policy is for cities and metro areas day after day after day. We're in the business of getting things done. We make things happen. We have the infrastructure internally to our governments to spend those dollars, to get them out quickly, put people to work, and beautify our cities. And whether it's reclaiming our park and open space, whether it's revitalizing our waterfronts, our downtown cores, and neighborhoods, this is what we do for a living each and every day. And mayors are focused on these issues. And so we're here in Chicago looking at what a mayor was able to do over a long period of time. And some folks get that amount of time and some don't. But let me say, design matters. And if you let mayors do their job with the proper resources, cutting through red tape, cutting across agencies that are now working together, Department of Transportation, EPA, the Department of Energy, and certainly our great, great friends at HUD. When you unleash the power of the federal government, unrestrict us from regulations and red tape and paperwork, be surprised at what we can do and how quickly we can do it. Cities matter. Design matters also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nutter. I have to agree. We're now going to move into the direct report outs from the facilitators from the forums, starting with Marilyn Taylor from the Design and Transportation Forum. Marilyn Taylor became the Dean of the School of Design at the University of Philadelphia in 2008 after practicing as an architect and urban designer at Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. I can't believe I messed that name up. Shameful. She is internationally acclaimed for her design of large-scale urban projects and civic initiatives. Marilyn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the first of three reporting out from the three fabulous panels, work sessions that we had yesterday. And I know I speak for all of the facilitators who are going to come up here in saying thank you to the mayors for the time you invested, for the quality of the ideas, for the passion behind them, for the examples, for everything you gave us so that we could put together this presentation, which is a very high-level summary of all of the things that we heard from you. And indeed, if it's hard to follow one mayor, imagine what it feels like to follow two extraordinary mayors. So I will do the best I can at reporting back on all the wonderful things that you told us as we were meeting. We went through opportunities, we went through obstacles, we went through resources, and we came in our panel to a set of recommendations that I'd like to share with you now. The first came directly from Mayor Diaz, reinforced by all of you. It is time to chart a new course. I like the Marshall Plan for Infrastructure and Transportation, a new course for transportation and infrastructure in our country. What do we mean by that? We mean we heard from you, the mayors would like to see a national vision for transportation backed by a capital plan that will require us to be innovative about reaching to many, many sources, including new and creative ones, to implement what we're doing. The mayors would like to see measurable milestones, clear standards, a path to follow as we move ahead to build America's 21st century transportation and infrastructure. Strong request, level with the American people. Reveal the true costs of transportation so that people in our communities can make real choices based on data, not just on habit. Provide information so the choices are clear. And we, designers, as your partners, Design Matters, want to speak up and help be a part of carrying that message. Shift the thinking from mode to balanced. It isn't whether it's a car or whether it's a bus or whether it's your bike or whether you walk or whether you take the train. It's are you using the means of travel to get where you're going that is best suited to that trip and does the most for the environment, the economy, and well-being for all of us. So what does that mean? We need to break down the institutional barriers and silos. Stop funding one element of transportation at a time. Think of optimizing the network. Offer the choices and think place-based, not mode-based. In fact, we've all experienced and had success with complete streets. We'd now like to think about complete places. Direct funds to the cities, not to the states. You said it. Cities, of course, for transportation means metropolitan areas and metropolitan regions, but the point here is that local governments have the ability to deliver the infrastructure that we need. They can work well in the context of MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations, but we need to set new high criteria for how those metropolitan planning organizations work based on the best practices of those that have been truly successful in bringing vitality to their region. Support and reward innovation. The pilot programs are great. You would like to see more. Yes, you're willing to be held accountable. Give us a set of metrics and we will live up to them, or we will correct what we didn't completely understand and go again. The temporary projects with paint and porch chairs sitting out in pavement to create open space are working. If we collect data, if we understand what truly works. We would like to see an increase in the federal support for the seed money for the planning and design that can make these things happen so we can learn well from each other. And of course, you said, and we all believe, small projects. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do well. Small projects can have very big and very positive impacts. We need to integrate across the board, as Marion Weiss and Michael Manfredi's absolutely fantastic sculpture park, Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle, dealt with a train, a freight line, a highway, and a waterfront, pulling them all together. What does that mean? That means design thinks about transportation, land use, open space, food supply, energy, water, as one integral understanding of how urban infrastructure can help cities thrive. We need to integrate processes. Departments, agencies, jurisdictions, and funding streams have to be more integrated. And as you in the federal government are already doing, we welcome your commitment to have agencies work together, and we would like to see more of it. Streamline, streamline, streamline. One of you out there who I can't see said, it just really can't take 13 years to build 5 miles of a transit line. We would like to partner with the government in working at ways to remove the regulations that are burdensome for no purpose, focus on those that do help us achieve disclosure, transparency, and effectiveness in getting projects done. Innovation extends to funding and financing as well. We need high-speed rail in our regions, and to do that, as we heard from Mayor Diaz, we would recommend and strongly support the creation of a national infrastructure bank. We want to be a part of the shifting from thinking of ourselves as consumers to thinking of ourselves as investors, individually and collectively, for the future. That money should flow to state of good repair. That's part of balanced and optimized transportation. And the fact that local transportation does generate revenue means that we in localities are ready to be creative, innovative partners if risks are appropriately assigned in bringing an array of financing tools to the building of infrastructure as well. Thank you, those of you mayors and others in our panel who said, hey, there is something we can do now. Gas prices are rising. Behavior is changing. How can we take advantage of this moment? Let's have a task force. Let's think of ways that we can collectively address choices in a moment when choices are in fact being made. We can do better, we can use technology to do better carpooling, car sharing. We can do transportation demand management. We can match seats with riders. We can market tax benefits for transit that already exist and make them more useful. We need to be partners with the federal government to make sure that these things happen smoothly and collectively to take advantage of this moment. So thank you, Mayor Nutter. Design matters. This wonderful example in New York is the High Line, where once industrial transportation has become transportation for well-being, people on bike, people on walks, people doing a fabulous, having an opportunity to experience their city. And in closing, I would just like to say what I heard and what was music to all of our ears, that the mayors and the metro areas are ready to be the best partners with the federal government to rebuild America's transportation and infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilyn. Moving on to design and development with Chris Lineberger. Chris Lineberger is a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. He is an author, a land use strategist, teacher, developer, and researcher. His most recent book, The Option of Urbanism, Investing in a New American Dream, was published in 2008. Chris?
Metropolitan areas are the foundation of the American economy. Over 90% of the GDP is made in our metro areas. The other thing that is important to note is that our mayors, the mayors in this room, the mayors throughout the country, are the natural and proven leaders of our metropolitan areas. So what our panel and what our group came up with were things such as, and this reinforces things you heard from Maryland, is that the Obama administration has begun movement towards a new metropolitan federal partnership, a new federalism that will build upon this economic foundation and the proven on-the-ground leadership skills of our mayors. This partnership is based upon design. That means creative place-based design, equitable design, smart design, measurable design, and sustainable design. Design matters. Both members of this partnership will bring to it what they do best, but it is essential that it be uniquely design-driven, place-driven, and metropolitan-driven, a bottom-up process. One of the things that we have going for us in this country is that unlike 25 years ago when the Mayor's Institute was founded, the market wants this. As a real estate developer, as a past real estate researcher, I know there is huge pent-up demand for walkable urban development. What cities do best. That was not the case 25 years ago. We're seeing that the pendulum is swinging from only building drivable suburban development 25 years ago to where the pent-up demand is for walkable urban development. This is being driven by demographics, the graying and browning of America, the rise of the millennials. If you want to know who to blame, blame the kids. It's their fault. The rise of the single-family household and the change in the traditional family. This is a structural change that's taking place in this country, and it's taking place on the ground every day, leading to this pent-up demand for walkable urban development. But these examples are not just theoretical. They're taking place on the ground over the last 10, 15 years. Here's downtown Houston. Towards the east of its downtown was a pretty much forlorn, overlooked industrial area, cut off from the city. And through great design, and in particular, through a great park that is at the heart of the east side, Houston now has a new heart. It has a new center where all of its people come and mingle. But from a developer point of view, what's really important is that hundreds of millions of private sector dollars have been invested around this park as a result of innovative, thoughtful design. But we have obstacles, and the major obstacle starts at the top, and that we, the people, have yet to really get that vision into our minds about what this future might be. And without that national vision, we will continue to flounder. That another obstacle is, of course, and you've heard it before, burdensome red tape and silo thinking. The Obama administration has gone miles in changing this, but there's many, many more miles to go. Another obstacle is basically out-of-date zoning, that many of our cities have zoning codes that only legally mandate drivable suburban development. As a developer, I've done 12 projects. Every single one of them has been illegal. It gets old. It'd be great if walkable urban development was by right. And here's an example in Portland where here is an industrial waterfront that I've seen many times over the years, and with creative overlay zoning, this is where it's going. So our recommendations is to continue to promote the national metropolitan policy. We need to elevate design excellence into our thinking about this, place-based design. We need to enhance current efforts to reduce federal silos and the red tape that results in 13 years required to put in place a new rail transit line. And very importantly, we need to ask the federal government to do what it can do best, not necessarily more cash, but credit enhancement, loan guarantees to help local jurisdictions and the private sector pay for much of the Marshall Plan that we just heard about from Mayor Diaz. So what does it all add up to? On the ground, we see lots of examples of smart planning, smart design, leading to increased land values. Here in Raleigh, you can see a 150-acre subdivision, 600 homes, that is equal in value to the Wachovia Center in downtown Raleigh, sitting on 1.2 acres, a 90-time increase in land valuation and, importantly for mayors, tax valuation. that this, and when you look at the cost of servicing through infrastructure, that 3-acre site in downtown Raleigh, the return on investment to the city of putting the infrastructure in was 35%. Compare that to that subdivision where the return is a mere 2% per year. The smart money goes with smart design. And here's another example from Portland, and I know we all have Portland fatigue, but they do so many good things there. The now famous Portland streetcar, where the first phase was a $55 million investment. It sparked the real estate development community to build $3.5 billion worth of development in the Pearl District. This is just the kind of leverage that can happen when you give the market what it wants and it's designed creatively. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Moving on to design and 21st century challenges. Tony Griffin. Tony Griffin has built a 20-year career in both the public and private sectors, combining the practice of architecture and urban design with the execution of innovative, large-scale, mixed-use urban redevelopment projects and citywide and neighborhood planning strategies. In 2010, Griffin launched her own consulting practice, Urban Planning and Design for the American City, whose first project is to work with the Kresge Foundation and the Mayor of Detroit to develop a comprehensive citywide strategic plan, no easy task, in Detroit. Griffin is also an adjunct associate professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Tony Griffin.
Good morning. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but design matters. Why does it matter? It's about the people in cities and how good design is about improving their lives. We spent a minute in our panel talking about and reflecting upon why design matters and what it actually contributes to the health of cities. And these are some of the words that came across about 70 or 80 people in one room together: a sense of place, a quality of life, a promotion of growth, a promotion of identity. There really is no getting away from how design has a direct impact on people and the lives they lead in cities. Our panel was about the 21st century challenges, and we had 3 amazing speakers who spoke about smart cities, changing demographics, and public health. But as you can imagine, in a room full of mayors and designers from a diverse group of cities, both small and large, the 21st century challenges in urban America today are fairly vast. The list you see before you are a number of other challenges that we discussed in the room very briefly. And through a modest vote, our group decided to focus on these challenges: smart cities, vacant land and foreclosure, aging infrastructure, civic engagement, and the public realm. So what I'm going to do is outline for you some of the overarching opportunities, challenges, and solutions that cut across these different issues. There were 5 key opportunities that were discussed in our group. The first is that our public land is, in fact, our greatest civic asset. The foundation of a new public realm depends on the public's commitment and political will. The public realm and the city's public land is indeed a tremendous opportunity. This is a time for innovation. Allow for flexibility and innovation in regulation and funding. You've heard that theme across the other 2 speakers. And small moves, not just mega projects, can have a tremendous impact on the civic quality and health of a city. These are some examples of how some of those small-scale interventions work. This is a mural project that we saw from Tom Main yesterday. Leveraging integration, and Marilyn has already spoken about this, but moving to a framework of both integrated systems, processes, partnerships, and funding with design at the intersection. And we are beginning to see great examples of how the federal government is beginning to align itself towards this intersection. And we must set a bigger table. It is not just about the federal government coming to rescue the cities. It is not just about local city halls reaching down to try to affect their communities. The table has to be set to bring all partners together, the federal government, city agencies, nonprofits, philanthropy, and the business community. But as we all know, there are obstacles that exist there on the ground, and there were 6 key ones that cut across our issues. The significant limited human capital that exists in some of these cities. One of the mayors in our group talked about the fact that he has only volunteer staff to deal with some of these issues. So how do we reach down and find ways to give access to partnerships and other resources in creative ways to help these mayors? Some cities have a constrained local governance structure which dilutes their leadership ability to effectuate design in positive ways. And some cities actually lack the ability to access partnerships in a way that can help them find those resources to find technical expertise in their cities. The second obstacle was that if everything is a priority, actually nothing becomes a priority. There are great pressures that mayors have in our cities around trying to address near-term needs and the urgencies that are expressed by their constituents versus the ability to really do long-term planning for sustainable change, in part because there really is no incentive to do so. This happens at the city level, this happens at the regional level. Are we risk takers? Are we relying on older forms and models of evaluating value and not taking into consideration that some of these cities actually require us to be much more experimental in the ways with which we think about risk as a way of promoting innovation? We're dealing with 20th century regulations that actually discourage innovations. Our zoning regulations in many of our cities are antiquated, that haven't been updated for the last 50 to 60 years, and they don't allow for a flexible platform of innovation. Another example that was talked about was state DOT regulations and standards that are still designing, in some cases, 19th and 20th century infrastructure in a 21st century city. We continue to invest in this 20th century architecture in maintenance and repair. We're not stepping back and looking at the long-term viability of how relevant this infrastructure is in the way we use our roads and networks today. We can't talk about the design and health of cities without acknowledging that many of our cities, some of our cities, still have issues of the perception of public safety and how that limits the ability to attract capital, to attract investment, to attract intellectual talent in a way that can be productive towards these cities. And then lastly, we actually are in some cases conflicted about civic engagement. A number of people around our room discussed the fact that we all have real good intentions towards civic design and we want to get people together, but when we do, we actually have a diluted sense of the effectiveness and efficacy of how that civic engagement is actually supposed to guide us through a decision-making process for change. So we have 5 solutions that we'd like to put forward for you today. We must provide ways to find and strengthen local capacity within our municipalities. How can we tap philanthropy, such as we're doing in Detroit through the Kresge Foundation, to bring resources and put them in the ground and in City Hall to help? Similarly, HUD is doing the same thing and providing technical assistance to communities. We have to continue to find ways to bring that technical expertise on the ground. We've talked in some ways about the need of a more institutionalized position for urban design that could happen at state, regional, city, local, or federal levels, a chief urban designer or office of urban design. This is happening in London through the CABE organization, for example. And remember that we also have to fund, and remember there's a back end to design, which is enforcement and maintenance, and we have to make sure that we're providing resources for those important functions as well. Secondly, we should establish knowledge networking. This is an amazing convening, and the federal government is just fabulous at bringing together and convening talent. How do we make sure that that talent continues to permeate after we leave this room? And since we're in an electronic world where we're trying to enhance our systems of infrastructure, we also must enhance our technological infrastructure to allow for greater access of these knowledge networks as means of sharing, connection, and learning. It is imperative that we move to a set of 21st century regulations. We must reform our zoning to be more integrated and more innovative around mixed uses. Miami 21, the recent massive rezoning of Miami, is a tremendous and extraordinary effort to be applauded and replicated. How do we enable integrated infrastructure towards the complete streets concept that Marilyn talked about by creating reforms to DOT street and highway standards to allow for combining of transportation, green systems, energy, water, and other systems, and pedestrians all in the same right-of-way. David Burney from New York showed us some great examples of the work that they're doing there on the ground to establish and institutionalize these standards and actually mobilize them and implement them throughout the streets of New York City. Fourth solution is to incentivize innovation and to enable flexibility. Our group talked a lot about the ways with which we have to find and be much more aggressive at how we braid and be creative about the streams of financing, bringing them together to help us with innovative projects, a sort of creative stimulus, if you will, to help us seed and fund experimentation at this smaller scale that, again, we felt and heard throughout the day can have an extraordinary impact on the design of our cities. The High Line, which Marilyn actually showed before for a different reason, was actually an open competition. This became a way by which to incentivize and promote innovation in design on a very challenging site. And our last solution was for allowing for new models of civic engagement. Teddy Cruz reminded us that we are in cities that have changing populations, changing demographics, and sometimes the standards and tools that we use for civic engagement aren't uniquely tailored to address and connect and be responsive to those populations. So perhaps in terms of thinking about civic engagement only as a physical space where people come together and dialogue, civic engagement actually becomes an action of doing, building, and creating, and that we actually form civic bonds and stewardship and pride in city through implementation as a way of bringing design awareness to cities. These are some examples of how that can happen on the ground to build our civic stewardship. So I will leave you with just a few last remarks on why design matters. Cities are where citizenship happens and where the majority of our populations are moving, as Chris reminds us. And so you, in fact, as the mayors in this room, are the chief urban designers of our cities. Cities are the places that should ignite our civic imagination. Cities have unique cultural identities that are really shaped by both formal design and informal design. And then if there are ways by which we can add value to those places by creating the flexibility and innovation and tools to continue the promotion of that at every scale, our cities will be better off forward. And lastly, it's not always about the big scale. The small scale really does matter and have a tremendous impact on the civic health and vitality of our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. To wrap up our report out, we're going to have the Dean of American City Design, Mayor Riley, come up. Mayor Riley Jr. is considered one of the most visionary and highly effective governmental leaders in America. Now in his 9th term as mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, he has achieved a national profile for his work at home and beyond. He's a recipient of the National Medal for the Arts. Mayor Riley has set the national standard for urban revitalization. And of course, again, we think his greatest contribution was the creation of the Mayor's Institute on City Design. Mayor Riley.
Well, thank you very much, Jason, and thank all of you. Thank you, Manny and Mike and Chris and Tony and Marilyn, Elizabeth. Thank all of you for your wonderful participation, amazing distillation of a busy afternoon of a few hundred people yesterday. Quickly, a few years ago, I was in a doctor's office and fell a patient, and a much older person was who didn't live in the city of Charleston, was talking about something happening in his neighborhood, and he said, "Well, you know, it's too bad, but I know there's nothing that you can do about it." And of course, the fact is, there is something that you can do about it, he can do about it, or should be done about it. There is not a juggernaut that is out of control that is forcing bad design decisions on America. Rather, it is our responsibility, and the more we study it through events like this in our work as mayors or design professionals, we understand the responsibility that we have to do it. And it's important to bring each of these issues down to the human level, the person, how it impacts an individual. You know, walkable is not a thing. It's one person at a time, often, having the opportunity to be in a inspirational setting, getting some exercise, and going about the business of life in that manner, one person at a time. Transit it's not a thing. It means that with it, someone may have 15 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon, or 30 minutes a day, or 150 minutes a week to spend with their child or children or spouse, or relax, or do something more meaningful and construction. Maybe walk the child to school, and of course, it isn't preordained that it is something wrong with children walking to school any longer. You know, the business of designing schools so there's a giant parking lot around it, rather than saying, now, how can we make this school walkable so as many kids as possible? We opened a school in Charleston, and it was in a neighborhood that we had planned new urbanism, and at the ribbon cutting, I said, the great thing about the school is that they're going to they need something much larger than you normally have at new schools, and that is bike racks, because so many kids can ride their bike to school. The well-designed building, you know, it's not a thing. A well-designed building is an opportunity for inspiration or interaction, or an opportunity for a pleasant rather than a dismal thought. You know, two people who had no training really in this, William H. Hollywhite and Jane Jacobs, they started from trying to understand how these decisions affected individual people, how they either made their lives more enjoyable and more constructive and more pleasant, or less so. A beautiful park, parkland's not a thing. It's everybody at this moment in the beautiful parks in our cities or this weekend, and all the stuff we can imagine. It's one human being at a time experiencing an opportunity in life for more joy and greater health and more pride and inspiration. It's our duty and responsibility. What the Obama administration has done, President Obama and Secretary Donovan and Secretary LaHood and Chairman Rocco Landsman and others in pulling together for the first time in our country's history an effort to develop a national urban policy is so important, and they're just beginning. This is the beginning of something that can never end. We need to be, and if this country is going to be successful, it has to be a country that understands it's an urban nation. There's got to be a new filter in front of every decision. Does this make towns and cities and metropolitan areas more livable, more creative, and more successful? But it's not the national government. But it's not the national government's responsibility alone. It's our responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. It's our mayor's responsibilities. I have a design review committee, city staff with designers. Nothing that any person in my city can see on a public thoroughfare that the city has anything to do with, whatever it is, whether it's affordable housing or whether it's a bench or parking, whatever. Or in a public restroom, what it looks like inside. If the public can see it, then we must make sure that all components of design have been considered so that it is fine as it possibly can be. All this is about creating excellence, not just more stuff, which is so important to our country. It is most appropriate that at the 25th anniversary of the Mayor's Institute for City Design, we have this opportunity to think about the future. It's appropriate because at every Mayor's Institute meeting, an amazing thing happens. You see and feel all these light bulbs going on in the minds of these leaders who cannot wait to go back home and to put these new ideas and thoughts into action. So we have discovered in this process not only how to make a more beautiful park, a more livable city or place in our city, we have discovered the extraordinary appetite and need to make our country a place of well-designed towns and cities. That's our duty, that's our responsibility. It was in the Athenian city oath. We have a responsibility not just to inherit our place, but to leave it more beautiful than we found it. Thank you very much.